Welcome in to Says Who Sports. I'm John Dauphin. Joining us right now is an Indiana sports legend. Played for Bob Knight's Indiana Hoosiers from 81 to 85. Was a two-time captain there. A man who guarded a player named Michael Jordan into a rare off night in a March Madness regional semifinal game. The myth continues to grow on that as the years pass. Whose first college basketball...
Why is that a myth?
We'll get to that. I want to get your take on that, Dan. Whose first college basketball head coaching job at Bowling Green happened at the same time Urban Meyer came to Bowling Green for his first head coaching job. Who has become a force in his own right in sports radio and TV. Can find his shows Don't At Me with Dan Dakich on OutKick Network and the Dan Dakich Show on Indy's Sports Ticket 14:30 a.m. weekdays. The pride of Andrean High School, the Fighting 59ers in Merrillville, just south of Gary. Dan Dakich joins us. Dan, great to have you here at Says Who Sports. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, I appreciate you guys having me. That's a hell of an introduction. I don't know if any of it's true, but I will say this. I always tell people always say, well, the myth that you guarded Michael Jordan. I don't know, the tape's right there.
No,
That's a myth, I suppose, but I always say, well, Bobby Knight guarded Michael Jordan. I said, I didn't see his fat ass out there in a defensive stance. I mean, so, no,
yeah.
I'm happy to be here. I remember your dad, right? Your dad played center field at Indiana. Phil.
My brother.
Your brother.
Yes.
Your brother.
That's
he
right. Played with.
He was a really good player.
Yeah, he was part of the team that had Mickey Morandini, of course.
Yeah.
John Wayner, long career. So he was part of that team. I appreciate that. And on the Jordan thing, Dan, have you and Michael? He said one time, I believe, that media had made it like a one-on-one thing. Like he said, I was licking my chops at the shots I got. I just didn't hit them. And then you said there was the stuff, obviously, about, I found out I was going to go, I was guarding Jordan. I threw up. Yeah. But essentially, Knight told you, three things? No back cuts. Keep him off the offensive glass. What was the third one?
You couldn't post me up because I could play post defense.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, Michael can lick his chops. It's great, man. But he got his ass kicked. And then we played golf later that summer. I beat him out of $6,000. Me and Alford and Timmy Knight and Jordan played. And, he said it was a day. We were on like the fifth tee at the IU golf course, and he said something like, he just signed his Nike deal that day, and he wasn't very good. He wanted to bet. I said, I'll bet you whatever you want. And, he got beat. I was pretty good back then, and now he's really good, and now I've never played him. In fact, last time I saw him, I went to dinner with him after a Bulls playoff game. He invited my brother and I to his restaurant with his agent. But other than that, I don't know him. I like giving people hell because IU fans, for whatever the reason, are mad at me all the time. And, they say, well, you really didn't stop him. Well, of course I didn't stop him. We played team defense. Coach Knight was a great defensive coach. Michael got in foul trouble. But it is what it is. And I'm just thrilled that as the worst athlete, running, jumping, that kind of thing, to ever play at Indiana, I'm at least remembered for one thing playing at Indiana. If it's got to be something, might as well be, beating Michael Jordan and his great team. So it's nice to be remembered for that as opposed to something, else, I guess.
You were a smart player, good passer, that defense, all the above. So, yeah, I remember it well. Speaking of Andrean High School, Dan, and those Fighting 59ers who won a state championship in hoops a few years ago too, right? You scored 49 in a game, was then probably still school record. This was before the three-point shot existed, so you were getting them old school style. Was it a lot of jumpers, a lot of three-pointers, old school, like driving to the bucket, getting the and one? Tell us about that game.
I honestly don't remember. I know it was in three quarters because we were beating the hell out of a team at Lowell. The only thing I remember about the game, truthfully, two things. One, I made two or one free throws before the game started because They had gotten a technical foul for something, I can't remember. And the other thing was, I came home from the game. Lowell is a community about 30 minutes south of where, I lived more in Gary than Maryville, but we used to go to the McDonald's on Broadway in Gary, right between Lew Wallace High School and Andrean, and all the kids would gather. This is a Tuesday night. It was a weeknight, maybe Wednesday, I don't know, but went there. Nobody was really there, so I went home after the game, and my dad said, "Hey, you broke the school record." I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "You want the good news?" I said, "Sure." He goes, "IU was there, Coach Cruz was there, and he left at halftime, but they want to invite us to the Indiana-Ohio State game that Sunday, which was for the Big Ten championship game. And, if you're going to have a good game, you might as well have one, when the school that you love or that you idolize going is there." So I do remember that was a pretty damn good night. Let me put it to you that way. That was I don't really remember the game other than sitting there, didn't know how many points I had, and one of my friends told me I had 49, and there was about 7 minutes to go in the game, and we didn't even play the fourth quarter, and I couldn't really believe it. I knew that I was scoring, but I didn't realize I guess I had 30 at half, and like, okay, that's, I think it's still a school record. It was a gym record. It's funny you bring it up. It was a gym record, and somebody about 2 months ago was doing something about Indiana sports history, and he said, "Hey, somebody broke your gym record at Lowell High School. Somebody had 50, I guess. So I think I still have the Andrean record, but I'm not sure."
Right on. Good stuff. Appreciate you sharing that, Dan. You played baseball at Andrean as well, did you not?
Yeah, I was on the Andrean baseball team's probably the best program in the state. Dave Pishkur is still the coach. His first year was my junior year, the same year, and Andrean baseball was nothing. It barely had a program, and Dave came in, and he was young, and we ended up being really good. We ended up winning a sectional. They had never even competed for a sectional, won I don't know how many games, and Dave has taken that program, won 8 state championships, and he's the all-time leading wins leader, state championship leader, and those of us, he just sent us a text on Thanksgiving that are a part of his first team. Coach Pishkur was in my wedding and is one of my best friends. And so, yeah, I'm a proud alum. I'm a proud alum of Indiana baseball. I played there for a year, but I was going to flunk out because in my day, and your brother's day probably too, he was a few years after me. I got to know Mickey pretty good in Wayner. But in my day, you basically had double headers every day. And coming off basketball, the next day I was in the field house hitting in batting practice, taking ground balls, and at the field we played Central Michigan, and we had double headers, man. I was getting ready to flunk out, and they got a new coach, and I decided not to play. And I look back, I wish I had played, but I didn't. And Indiana's baseball team has, gotten pretty good, gotten really good.
Yeah, Joe Hillman on that team too.
Yeah, Joey played. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Ted Kitchell, I think it was Ted Kitchell played 1 year, pitched. I played a year. Joey was good. Joey was a draft choice, and went to the Oakland A's spring training and maybe double to AAA, something like that. But Joey was a really good player.
And speaking of Coach Pishkur and all that history, guys still doing it. Decades later, he presented you for induction right into the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame this year. There's a guy who is about family values, bringing it every day for decades. Great example of how to do it. What did it mean to you, Dan, to have him present you for induction?
Thanks for asking that, because Dave had to drive 3 hours from Maryville to Newcastle. He lives in Crown Point, actually, and then back, in one day. And it was really only for a 10-minute induction. And, a couple guys had, Greg Doyle, the writer from the Indy Star, had asked me if he could do it, but Doyle is kind of a creepy dude, and I didn't want him involved in anything in my life. So when Coach Pishkur, he called me. He said, "Hey, I'm going down there in September to introduce, or present you, I guess." I was thrilled. I mean, it means the world to me. And as I said, Coach and I, we're golfing buddies, very competitive still with one another. And, I can't overstate what he's done at that place. Like, we had Major League Baseball guys there when I was there. Danny Plesac was 19 years in the big leagues. His brother Joe was a second-round pick until he got hurt, and we didn't have any kind of program. And then, in fact, the Plesac brothers transferred from Andrean to Crown Point because we didn't have a baseball program that was any good after their sophomore year. And Dave came in, and, man, he's a great coach, a better man, and a better friend.
Gary, Merrillville, that Northwest Indiana thing where you grew up, the region, tough, hardworking, blue-collar people, disciplined, no excuses. So seemingly a strong fit to go play for Bob Knight at Indiana. What was your first interaction with Coach Knight specifically? Yours and your mom and dad's?
Yeah, we when they invited me to go, I think I said earlier, to go to the Big Ten championship game in 1980, we went down there, and I didn't know anything about recruiting. Nobody from my high school had ever been recruited to play Division I basketball. Now, since then, a lot have. Some great players, Heron Goody, Jimmy Bull. But anyway, we walk into Assembly Hall, and I've never seen anything like it. Like, I'd never been to a college basketball game, and I'm like, wow. Indiana wins. Butch Carter makes a couple free throws. Place goes nuts. It's senior day. It's Mike Woodson's senior day, and we don't really know what to do, so we're just kind of leaving. And Jimmy Cruz, Coach Cruz, comes out, and he kind of says, "Hey, come on in the locker room." I'm starstruck, right? My brother, me, and my dad, and long story short, Coach Knight talks to the team, whatever, introduces himself to us, says, "Wait right here." And, I'm looking, I'll never forget, the place kind of cleans out, but we're waiting on Coach Knight to do all the press stuff, and I'm looking at this goals board that they had, and I'm not really paying attention. I'm reading the goals for the team, and I get a whack right on the side of my head. Actually, it was this side, and I turn, because I think it's my brother messing with me, and I turn with my fist clenched, and I go, "Oh, man, it was Coach Knight." And he goes, "Hey, Danny, are you going to play here or not?" And I looked at my dad, and I said, "Well, are you offering me a scholarship?" And he goes, "Yeah, dumbass, I'm offering you a scholarship. What do you think? I want you to walk on?" "Yeah." I looked at my dad, I go, "Well, yeah. Yeah." So we sat down. He did an interview with Chet Kopic, and we talked for a while after that. And, I drove home on cloud nine, right? Because I didn't expect any of that. I had no idea. But that was my first interaction, man. And that's a wild. It cost them no money to recruit me, zero. I guess a ticket to the game for my dad, my brother, and myself, but that's it.
You got a knock in the head from Coach Knight, almost brought it back, and wow, what an intro. Yeah. What you've said, Dan, that Coach Knight, save for the profanity, etc., sounded very much like your dad in terms of expectations, discipline, approach. Describe that.
Well, what would happen is, like, I'm kind of sitting here, you sit in these somewhat uncomfortable, hard chairs, and you're in a line, and the line in front of your locker, and Coach would speak to you. And every once in a while, I do like a double take, because his mannerisms were so much like my father. His mannerisms were like, man, and my dad swore, but not, my dad wasn't coaching, he was my dad, right? I mean, it's like anybody's dad, right? But he really, just the mannerisms, and it took me back, or took me aback a little bit, the first few times. And, after that, I got kind of used to it. but it was very odd. It was very odd, and it kind of, I don't know the right word. Like, I never had a problem, even when I wasn't playing or I didn't start or I didn't play for a while. I never really had a problem thinking I wanted to leave or, anything like that, because I just felt like between being there, the school, the program, his manner, I just kind of dug it. It was just kind of, John, it was just kind of, I don't know, it felt pretty right, I guess is what I would say.
Dan, was it from a Indiana University's perspective, was it Hoosiers or bust for you? I mean, you had closer to you, South Bend, Digger Phelps had it going up there, right? And then obviously Coach Katie and Purdue. Was it always Hoosiers for you growing up? Were you always a Hoosier fan?
I never dreamed that I could play at that level. I was a big DePaul fan. In my area, we got DePaul against Marquette, Notre Dame, UCLA. Indiana was on, but I wasn't like a Southern Indiana kid, but I did understand. Gene Katie came to my house. I think I was the first recruit he ever went to see. He came and he made a tour of Northwest Indiana. He came to see me, my teammate Jimmy Bullock, who became a great player at Purdue, Roger Harden. Rob went to Florida. Roger went to Kentucky. Ronaldo Thomas was in our area. He played at Houston. There's about 8 kids, and I really liked Coach Katie. I'm not going to lie. When he left, my dad and I said, man, I like that guy. But for me at that time, Indiana had been undefeated in 76. They went to the Final Four in 73. Were undefeated in 75. I mean, it was the best basketball program, in the country. And I didn't ever want to say, well, I'll tell you 2 things. I really liked Purdue because I liked Katie. But my brother was a sophomore at Wabash. And my brother's my idol. He's really smart. And he said, you're not going to Purdue over Indiana. I said, why? He said, because for a lifetime, Indiana, being an Indiana player means so much more than being anything else, a Pacer player, a Purdue player, a football player. And if you get the opportunity, you got to go. And I didn't want to go somewhere and say, well, yeah, but I was recruited by Indiana. A couple of friends of mine why don't you go to Butler? Butler didn't have a very good program. I'd get a chance to play a lot. And I'm like, yeah, but I want to challenge myself with the best program. And I'd heard how tough Coach Knight was, and I wanted to challenge myself with that too. I guess it's a long answer, but, John, it wasn't Indiana or bust. I like Michigan. Florida came into my house. But once, I don't even know why I let people in my house, because I was going to Indiana after I told Coach Knight I was going to Indiana. I can't remember that far back, but it was kind of odd looking back on it.
Right on. And wow, you mentioned DePaul. Those Blue Demons at that time, we used to play, my brother and I, Phil, we'd play pickup basketball in the driveway, and it was Blue Demons, man. Mark Aguirre and those guys. And I think you'll agree with me on this. I don't mean any disrespect to anybody in particular. Coach Ray Meyer, outstanding what he built. Joey Meyer, straight down the tubes. Yeah. Did I miss something?
No, they've really struggled. He kept it going for a little bit, and Joey he passed away, but Joey was a friend of mine. But, yeah, they've really – in fact, it's funny. People always say that, well, your dream job was to be the head coach at Indiana. And that's probably true as I got older, but if you would have asked me when I was a kid, my dream job was playing shortstop for the Cubs or playing for the Bulls, but it would have also been being the coach at DePaul because, I like you said, I mean, where did you guys grow up?
Ohio, Northwest and Central, Columbus.
So when you, at least for us, you got Ohio State. We got a Big Ten game of the week, but we were, the big game was Marquette against DePaul or UCLA going to Notre Dame. In fact, when I was a sophomore, I snuck into that game with a fake ticket, UCLA against Notre Dame. Some student had given us, we drove there, and some student had given us we bought tickets for $5 and they were counterfeit. We were so stupid. They were from like the last game, and I handed it to the ticket taker, and he grabbed me, said, "These are fake tickets." I knocked his arm away and sprinted into the student section and took off my shirt and hid, so. And you asked me earlier about Notre Dame. Why didn't I go to Notre Dame? I'll tell you a story. I went to Catholic school. You mentioned Andrean. And when I committed to go to Indiana, the nuns, 3 nuns, grabbed me and said, "Mr. Dakich, come in here." And I went into my homeroom, and they said, "Why aren't you going to Notre Dame? We want you to go to Notre Dame." I said, "Well, Digger Phelps didn't recruit kids in Indiana. He never had a kid in Indiana until after me, Kenny Barlow and Scott Hicks." I said, "Sisters," I said 2 things. 1, I want to go to Indiana. And 2, Digger Phelps didn't recruit kids from Indiana. And they said, "Well, we're going to change that. We're going to call him." I said, well, good luck with that. Let me know how it goes, right? I'm like, okay, all right. DePaul recruited me. 2 of my high school friends sent a letter to Ray Meyer, and Ray Meyer sent him a letter back that said, "Yeah, we know Dan and his teammate James Bullock, but they're not the kind of players we want at DePaul." Literally, my 2 buddies showed me these letters. That night, this is honest to God, that night Joey Meyer called me, and he said, "Hey, Dan, this is Joey Meyer from DePaul. We want to know, we'd like to recruit you. We would love to be involved with, seeing if you'd be interested." And I said, "Coach," I said, "I literally have this letter right here in my hand from Coach Meyer saying," and I read it to him verbatim, right? And he goes, "Oh, Dan, you got to understand, Coach is older. He doesn't really know who we're recruiting right now. Disregard that." And I'm like, "Come on, Coach." Come on.
Yeah,
right?
give me a break, man.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to get to, speaking of, I want to get to some current state of Big Ten basketball with you, but on the Coach Knight front and what you learned from him about preparation, Dan, and how that figures into your media business, if you will, now, your shows, the preparation that goes into it. Please talk about that. You are obviously gifted at riffing off the cuff on any number of subjects, way beyond sports. Pick one. But obviously you do homework, right? And you prepare. How does that work for you? What's involved in your preparation?
John, off air, I told you I didn't really, have respect for Coach Knight, and that's nothing to do with him coaching me or me coaching for him. It's what he did when I was at ESPN. He backstabbed me. I was working on Tuesday Big Ten games, and he wanted that job, and he didn't realize that what he was saying to these people was being relayed to me. Because I was friends with the same people. They were good friends of mine. But taking that aside, preparation was not something that I had in high school in terms of scouting or anything like that. We didn't do that. In fact, when we went to the state finals, our high school coach said, "No, we're not going to exchange film with the team New Albany that we played because we're going to do our thing." And so when I got to Indiana, I didn't really understand it. I didn't understand walkthroughs. I didn't understand, being on the scout team. We didn't have that. But I learned quick. And people ask me, tell me something you learned from Coach Knight. And that really is the number one thing. I do 2 shows. I do a 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. show on OutKick.com. It's a sports-based show that we get into politics. We get into other things. And then I do a noon to 3 show here on Indy Sports Ticket 1430. And, it's 5 hours, different shows. The morning show, the OutKick show, which is called Don't At Me, you can catch it on OutKick.com and YouTube and other places. I have a team. I have some really good people. It's the best team I've ever been on, just fantastic people that I get to work with. And, we do a call, but I have 2 great guys. I call them the Flying Knicks. We have a guy that gets guests, but I'm on basically, I'm basically all day paying attention, whether it's on my phone with Twitter, whether it's ESPN.com or OutKick.com, whatever it is, John, because there's no script. I don't have a teleprompter. We're not going to highlights, things like that. So I got to be able to draw on different things. The afternoon show, basically kind of the same thing, except it's more local. It's, I once my show is over at 11 o'clock, I come upstairs and I sit and I read everything I can about the Colts. Now, Colts IU basketball, Purdue right now. But I've already done most of the work the previous night. Indiana plays, I'll watch the game. Purdue plays, I'll watch the game, tape it, watch it back if there's something I need to talk about. But preparation is massive. I couldn't do this job by showing up. I tell people now after 15 years, I can do a show or two and you would never know the difference. But show after show after show after show, people are going to know that you're hollow. People are going to know that you're just talking, and I don't want that. So sometimes it annoys my wife. She's like, you're addicted to your phone, and she's not wrong. But a lot of it is, hey, I'm trying, maybe I see something about the Giants that today that I bring back 3 weeks from now when the Colts play the Giants, something like that. So sure. I can tell, I'll give you great credit here, John. True story. A lot of times I do something. I did a podcast yesterday, and great guys. I've known the guys, but they didn't know anything about me. Oh. They knew a show, right, that I did, and they buttered me up, all that. But you're great at this because you did research. You paid it. You went and prepared, and that is something I learned, from Bob. Now I learned that, and I also learned, and I wish my coaching career would have gone differently. I got too many kids hurt, but I learned to really drive and not accept from anybody, mediocrity. And sometimes that's abrasive. Sometimes I come off the wrong way to people. But I also, I learned that, hey, look, people will give you so much. Human nature will give you so much, and it's a coach's job or it's a broadcaster's job to bring out more. And I enjoy that. So I learned a lot from Coach Knight. As much, like I said when he passed away, John. I was with him 16 years, and if people didn't like how he did things, I don't care. It was our thing. It's like the mob, right? La Costa Nostra, our thing. You don't like it, you're some writer, you're an outside person, okay, great, that's you. But we loved it. Now, whether that makes us sick, whether that makes us ridiculous, toxic masculinity, I don't know, I don't care. That was our thing. We may fight among ourselves, blah, 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 blah. I may not respect somebody not respect me, cool. But in terms of Indiana basketball under Bob Knight, I don't give a shit whether you liked it, he liked it, they liked it, you didn't like it, somebody didn't like it. I don't give a damn. That was our thing, and I loved that part of it. I did.
I'm with you, man. Well said. Yeah. And let's face it, if not for that program, that man, and those years, and that hardware, maybe we're not sitting here talking. You don't know what path you're on. You got that IU cred out of the gate, 18, 19 years old, made the most of it, led some great clubs there. And Dan, that to me, the Coach Knight thing is about what was a power program. And right to the uniforms, Dan. That clean, tight Indiana font, those uniforms haven't changed, but the program has changed. And I'm 59, right? So I came up on IU basketball, including your era, and where it's gone since Coach Knight. That's why it applies so much.
Well, here's my thought on it. And again, there's very few people that were there longer, but I was there. This is one of my last years, 97, I think. They made a decision at IU, and I was in the meeting. Coach Knight wasn't. I was in the meeting. They were going to de-emphasize basketball, not from a financial standpoint, but from a publicity. We're not going to put it on our publications. We're going to put women's tennis, whatever. Okay. And they were trying to get Coach Knight out of there. They were. And the reason I stayed so long was Coach Knight told me I was going to be the head coach. He was going to retire, and I was going to be the head coach. So I'm like, yeah, Marshall came at me, a couple other schools. I said, no, I'm going to stay. And anyway, long story short, once Coach Knight was gone, they did not want that again. They did not want anybody with that type of power. And when Sampson got fired and they made me the interim head coach, I remember going into Rick Greenspan's office. I said, all right, if you want me to do this right, here's 5 guys we got to get rid of right now, and let's rebuild this program. No, we can't do that, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Well, they bring in Tom, and I will say this, and this is something that I sent actually a bunch of former players, including Mike Woodson, Isaiah Thomas, Steve Alford, Todd Meyer, whoever. I put them all in a group text, and I said, look, Mike and others, Randy Whitman is an advisor. I said, here's the deal. I said, the only 2 coaches that have been successful post Bob Knight were Calvin Sampson. Now, I'm not talking about the cheating. I'm just talking about on the court. He'd have been fine. And half of Tom Crean. And why I say half, Calvin came in, and I worked for him for a year. He didn't give a crap about offense or defense. He just cared if you were tough and played hard. When Tom Crean came to Indiana, he had to do 2 things. He had to get recruits, obviously, and he had to get guys back to being tough and playing hard. And a couple of years in, once Tom had Zeller and those guys, and they had a little bit of success, Tom forgot about that. In my opinion, I could be wrong. This is from people there. He started recruiting guys. You had Hannah Pereira getting arrested and playing 2 games later. All kind of different stuff. And I don't think Mike, I know Archie, you can't give in to players when you're at Indiana. Indiana is, regardless of what Purdue's doing, Michigan State's been the model program. But Indiana, when you play, when you wear those uniforms, when you wear those pinstripes, it's a special deal. I saw it as a 10-year Big Ten announcer for ESPN. I'd go to the Illinois-Minnesota game, and, okay, it's a good crowd. And everybody, yeah, it's great. But it's not like when Indiana comes in. Or you go to the Michigan State-Purdue game, and it's a big game. And, okay, but, boy, when Indiana comes in, even without Bob Knight, and I've always said the number one thing you have to do at Indiana is you have to establish toughness, playing really hard all the time without excuses, and then worry about your offense, worry about your defense. And to do that, you just can't give in to players. And I think Woodson, he's paid a lot of kids a lot of money legally and all that. But I'm thinking to myself, you got a fat-ass center running up and down in Balo that is paid $1.2 million. What would my motivation be if I was paid $1.2 million? I mean, I don't know. I read today where Anthony Leal is making $400,000, and Anthony Leal, John, had as many baskets as you and I had, in their last couple games. So it has changed, but what hasn't changed is for the schools that know. The coaches, the schools, the players. Indiana is still on a mantle, even though we're talking about however many years. Because I'm telling you, when I'd go do an Indiana-Minnesota game, at Minnesota, that place was a hell of a lot louder than even when Michigan State came in to play Minnesota or Purdue came into Minnesota. And it just was. And that's something that going back to, when Coach Knight was there, we loved knowing wherever we go, it's going to be sold out in the biggest game in town. It's still that, not to the same degree maybe, but the coaches that have been there have not understood that narrative that, and then with that, there's a way you play in the state of Indiana. Indiana, regardless of what people think about class basketball or whatever, John, there's a way people expect you to play. People that are my age grew up on Katie and Knight and Larry Brown coaching and Slick, all really tough guys. That's what we're used to. You mentioned no excuses. No excuses, play your ass off, get beat, but you walk out of there going, man, they played their ass off. And you ask me why, I'm telling you why. I don't think the guys that have coached there have understood. I think Sampson did. I really do. Sampson just was a cheat at that point in his career, and he couldn't stop. But I don't think Woody's, and I think Archie was, I watched one of Archie's assistants when Romeo Langford made a layup and came to the bench. One of his assistants was doing this bowing down shit. And I remember thinking, what are you talking about? Like, this is Indiana, man. This ain't Wright State. Let's go. So that's my 10 cents on it.
No, I appreciate it. So yay or nay, Dan, does Woodson, who's of the program, enjoyed that success back in that era with Coach Knight, does he get it done? Yay or nay? And by getting it done, I mean getting the program to a level of a edge of top 10, 15, getting to the second round of the tournament, maybe an Elite Eight. Do you say no? I don't see it.
No, I do. I don't know. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know, and I'll tell you why I don't know. I'm not giving up on. I know they have real talent, and that's the first thing you got to have. You got to have real talent, and they do. The kids, they didn't play worth a damn out in the Bahamas, but I'm not one of those that says 7 games in, you got a long season. I don't think the Big Ten's very good. In fact, we were talking about this. One of my teammates and I were talking. We've seen Illinois. We like them. Purdue's pretty good. But other than that, Michigan State's okay, not great. I think I mentioned Illinois. Ohio State's middling. I just don't think the league's very good. And I think that, a lot of people don't like what Mike has done. They're going to be disappointed because I think they're going to do well in the league. I just, one of the things that I look at when people say get it done, what I say about get it done, it's different now than it was back then. Getting it done back then, well, it's not that different. Like we had to, when I played, not necessarily when I coached, because Kentucky was beating our ass, but you had to beat Kentucky, you had to beat Louisville, you had to go to, you had to play well against, Notre Dame. We played those schools every year. Now you're playing, you're playing all these tournaments, you're getting your ass beat by 2025. That's not good. My view of getting it done is Indiana is not only competitive, but is a favorite, maybe not the favorite, to win all these big tournaments in the preseason. A favorite, a top 2 or 3 every year to win the Big Ten. And it's pretty much assumed that Indiana's going to go to at least the second weekend, Elite Eight of the tournament. But here's the caveat of that, John. I didn't realize this. In the entire history of Indiana basketball, there has only been 11 Elite Eight teams. Only 11.
Wow.
In the entire 100-year history. Like Duke has been to 11 since 2000. That kind of thing. So we are really, really past the era where Knight was winning national championships or at least going to the Final Four every 3 or 4 years. Like we're way past that. And maybe what you and I are saying isn't feasible, but it is because you have all the resources, NIL, you got all kind of money. Recruits you had 3 5-star recruits in the state of Indiana this year alone, for crying out loud. You've got a great arena, a national TV audience every night. There's nothing Indiana, a great school to go to, a great social scene to go to. There isn't anything that any school in the country, including Duke or any other school, that has more than what Indiana has. There just isn't. Now, I might have told you a few years ago, well, our facility needs updated. I'd be surprised maybe if Indiana can compete with the teams that are cheating, which, okay, but now there's no cheating. And now you got 2 guys. You got Mark Cuban and his former partner, Todd Wagner, both Indiana grads, giving a shit ton of money. So there isn't anything other than the culture within the basketball program that's stopping Indiana.
Right on, Dan, and I appreciate that perspective. And, of course, we're talking with Dan Dakich, and just a few more for you, Dan. Appreciate you so much for taking the time. Big Ten basketball, you mentioned it. What you look at right now, you say, doesn't look so good. I look back, and let's go back to, let's say 2000. Let's go back to the last freaking time a team from the Big Ten held the biggest hardware. Are you kidding me? For a conference that touts itself every year as, if not the toughest in the nation, certainly in the top couple, what, Dan, forgive me, what in the hell do they have to show for it? Now, somebody might say, and you just mentioned it, Dan, those words, getting it done. And that adjustment nowadays, now years, versus what that was decades ago. However, again, 2000 Sparty, what was it, Izzo's second year? We're going back to Mateen, Cleaves, are you kidding me? So every year Big Ten teams making runs. Ooh, Sweet 16. Ooh, Elite Eight. How many? Some years we get 2, or the Big Ten, 2 in the Final Four. Get somebody the championship game. Get 4 in the Sweet 16. Who gives a damn? They don't bring it home. I think they got a lot of proving to do, Dan. I know it's not always just about the hardware, but it is. What do you say about the conference?
After 25 years, it is. I mean, here's what I've said about the league. When I was at ESPN, the 2 guys that are still the producers of the halftime show that you watch in basketball, they're some of the smartest guys I know, and they're Connecticut guys, right? So they're riding high, even with Boeheim and all that.
Oh, yeah.
But they always called it the thick ankle league. They go, you got all these thick ankle guys in that league, football, basketball. I've said this. If you look at what the SEC has done here, and the SEC has really elevated basketball because they've elevated their coaches. You know, the coaches in the SEC are dynamic recruiters. They're dynamic personalities. I've always said, if you're going to say to me, all right, I'm putting a banquet on, and I need an entertaining coach from the Big Ten basketball selection to speak at my dinner. Not an alumni dinner where everybody laughs at every stupid joke that the head coach says, but neutral people. Like, I don't know, some business meeting to get the crowd enthused, to get the crowd motivated, to get the crowd entertained, to sell themselves, to sell. I don't know. I mean, who are you taking from the Big Ten? I'd take Bruce Pearl. Okay, right now, I'd take Mark Pope. You ever hear Mark Pope talk? He's, energetic, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I'd take a lot of these guys from the SEC. I don't know that I would take one from the Big Ten. I don't know that I would have taken one from the Big Ten since Knight and Katie left. I mean, Izzo's terrific, but he's by far, the best coach that this league has had over these years. But take him out of it because he's done his job. He's the last guy that wins it. He goes to the Final Fours. He's Mr. March. Take him out of it. I don't know. Matt did a great job. Matt's a guy I would love to coach my son. Matt's a guy, painter, that I would love to coach Indiana. I think it'd be great.
Ooh.
But over the course of the whole league, I mean, how many great recruiters are there? Like Indiana signs a guy. Brad Stevens and I used to talk about this when he was at Butler. Brad say, man, guy signs at Butler, they go from a 4-star recruit to a 3-star recruit. Guy signs at Indiana, guy goes from a 3-star recruit in these rankings to a 5-star recruit, right? Same thing with Duke. So, every year we hear about how great every recruit is that's coming to Indiana. Impact player, blah, blah, blah. Okay, all right. Well, damn. These impact players keep getting their ass beat, by the Miami of Florida's by 30 or by St. Mary's by 40 or whatever the hell it's been over, or don't make the tournament. So that's how I look at it. These schools are great. The athletic departments are flush with money. What do you want to recruit? You want to recruit to a big-time football weekend? There it is in the Big Ten. You want to recruit to a great academic institution? There it is. You want to recruit because the school's got hot girls? There you are. All these schools got a bunch of girls. They got a great, hell, even Northwestern, my niece went there, played volleyball. She's like, what a great party school. Nobody knows, right? So what do you want? And I just don't think they have dynamic personalities in that league that can recruit enough greatness. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But I've kind of studied this for a long, long time, and that's the conclusion I've come up with.
No, I got you. I want to ask you about sports media. We'll say media, journalism, media. We know what we're talking about. And you've said that in life, the losing is the toughest, and you've won a lot, be it at IU, elsewhere. You've certainly are winning at a big level in your gigs in the media. Why do you think, Dan, that telling the truth, that from being raised where you were and how you were, and that progression of seeing things, calling it what you and I would say, what I would say is matter of fact, telling the damn truth, is such a thing that those that don't do it, they want to sling it so-called controversial, that so many people are starving to hear the truth. You've said you're an entertainer. It's about entertainment. What are you doing that has taken you to the level that you're at?
It's interesting. I see something and I tell it, and that's controversial. Like people, I had a guy from one media outlet call me a couple years ago, and he said, "Hey, we're doing a story on guys that have really hot takes." And I said, "All right, give me a hot take. Well, give me a hot take that I did." And he gave me something. I said, "That's not a hot take. That's truth."
Right.
He goes, "Well, and I have the same exact reaction you just did, John, right? Like, what the hell are you talking about, right? Like, whoa. I don't know. One of the things that everybody now is media. Everybody has an opinion. And when I get criticized on Twitter by somebody, I always look at two things. One, now that, on OutKick, we get political, I always look and see if they're a Democrat or liberal, because I'm not. And then the other thing is I go, all right, I can close my eyes and they're either a young Indiana fan, they're either a West Virginia fan, or a Purdue fan. And I don't even have to look. Everybody has biases, and we all do. And when you go against those biases, the people that are the most insecure are going to react to them not being agreed with. And I think one of the things we've seen, let's take it to the media, is, I have had, I think it's 13 stories nationally written about me. A couple good, some bad. And even the good ones, they haven't told the truth. I've read them and go, no, that's not true. And this started with Coach Knight. When I'd read a story about him, I go, wait a second, I was there. That's not what happened. So I've never believed, once I became an adult, I guess. Like, I'm a guy that read 3 papers a day, the Chicago Tribune, Chicago Sun-Times, and the Gary Post-Tribune. I was reading Mike Royko's column in the Chicago Tribune when I was like 10 years old. I delivered the paper, the Gary Post-Tribune, for years, so that I could know when the paper was going to be delivered. So I was a news freak. I'm a news freak. But once I realized, wait a second here, this isn't honest. I decided I don't care. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to say what I think and think what I say, or whatever the saying is, because I don't want somebody to say, well, somebody may say, well, what you said about me wasn't true. And I'll say, okay, what did I say that wasn't true? And they're always full of shit. Like, they just are. And they'll say, well, and I'll go, no, what? Because I don't mind somebody saying that. But I think the truth, people are so used to being bullshitted or placated or whatever the right word is, that if you have a forum, and OutKick is the fastest growing place in America right now, it's bigger and bigger. People don't necessarily agree with you. And one thing I have learned, John, when I was on ESPN, you'd get a lot of people that loved you. You'd get a lot of vitriol, right? But when you talk politically on like OutKick, those people are really nasty. Like, the political people are freaking nasty, particularly this year with this election, and I kind of dig it. But, it's sad. Your age, my age, it's sad that the truth isn't the standard. The truth is like an exception, and that sucks.
So well said, Dan. Appreciate you. Dan Dakich, a winner. Can find his shows Don't At Me with Dan Dakich on OutKick.com, and the Dan Dakich Show on Indy's Sports Ticket, 14:30 a.m. weekdays. The pride of Andrean High School. Dan Dakich, much respect, Dan, and let's do it again.
Anytime.